As you can see from our brief introduction of all the tools there are no actual drawing tools. There is no crayons or pencils or paint buckets or anything that you might associate with a typical painting program. There's just really none of that there. So what exactly would we use a drawing document for? Well, I have used Google Drawing primarily for creating worksheets for myself, as well as other documents that I use with my kids. There's also other online uses as well, but I find myself primarily using it as a way to create supplemental material that I'm looking for. I've also found myself creating posters for within my classroom or messages that I'd like to display either around my classroom or inside or outside. So it's a great tool to use for publication, for larger publication where you'd want to maybe have the traits of writing. Uh, Google Drawing would be a great way to create a poster defining the one particular trait in the traits of writing, where you could then add little bits of information that you're hoping your kids will remember. It can take the place of buying posters or of creating by hand. It's just another way to create a publication that you'd like anyone or everyone to. Well, I think I'll begin by showing you how I would use Google Drawing as a means to create either a worksheet or in this case it would be an example of how to create sort of a final product for a project I had my kids do when they were studying Lewis and Clark. Well, I'll give you a little bit of background information. When we were studying Lewis and Clark, we ended up having many projects, small projects on several different topics, anywhere from the locations that they stayed to the animals and plant life that they discovered, as well as a mini biography on one of the primary people of the Lewis and Clark expedition. I believe my options for them were Meriwether Lewis, William Clark, Sacagawea, York, and Thomas Jefferson. What they ended up doing, what my kids ended up doing, was some research on their chosen person, and then they were to fill in a mini biography of that person. And I used Google Drawing to create the mini biography. And I'm going to show you right now how I did that. Well, I'm going to go ahead and bring my pointer over to my internal toolbar here. And what I ended up doing was using quite a few of the different shapes. I used the shapes to define the areas that I wanted them to fill in on their own. What I ended up doing was creating my drawing document to, to ask for the information that I'd like them to find on an online resource, and then they were to, by hand, go ahead and fill all that information in. Well, I used the shapes to go ahead and define the areas around the Google Draw program for some of the requirements of the project. I used some of these shapes around here, and specifically for the biography picture that I asked them to draw, I used the snip single corner rectangle for no other reason than I just kind of like the little dog-eared side. So I went ahead and created an area here. You can see my pointer. And the blue perimeter is just representing how large this particular object will be. And there we go. I just went ahead and let go. And it's still able to be manipulated. I can move it back and forth. I've also got the little circle attached there, which lets me rotate it left or right. I can angle it several degrees. If I don't like what I've done, do remember that over here, below the File Pull menu, we have the Undo. And I'll just undo the last command that you did. And I used the grid lines, those little red lines that are appearing, to help me really center all of these objects here. Now, to start with, I'm kind of putting this off-centered off to the upper right-hand side, so there are no grid lines to help me there. But as I add more objects, just like in other tools we've seen Google offer, the objects will start to orientate themselves. They'll start to offer grid lines off of the objects to help you really center things. So I don't spend a lot of time aligning and making it look perfect. I let the software do that for me. Well, now I like this. I like this blue box here that's going to actually turn into an area for a student to draw a picture of their chosen person from the Lewis and Clark expedition. And I think what I need to do now is get rid of this blue background. I don't want to print this off and then copy it and then hand it out with sort of this light blue if I'm using a color printer, or sort of off gray if I'm using a black and white. So I'm going to go up to my toolbars, and you'll notice that there are several more options here now that I have an object in my draw program, and I can go ahead and start to manipulate some of the different pieces of this object. The first one I'm going to do is take a fill color, that light blue, and because I just want to have a white background, I can choose transparent, and that'll just be transparent to see through, and that'll come into play if you were to start bringing different layers in here, meaning putting different objects down. Maybe you put a text box on top of a shape, on top of an image maybe that you import. But I'm going to go ahead and make my background white, and that just gives it, that just makes it easier for me to print off and then copy and then hand out. It's a nice white background for my kids to then draw in their chosen person. Well, I want a caption or just like some instructions so my students know exactly what it is they're going to be doing here. So I'm now going to go up, here comes my target, up to the text area, the text box. And when I click on the text box, my pointer becomes a plus sign or a crosshair. And either inside or below, I haven't decided yet, I'm going to click and pull, and this is where I'm going to add the information that they are to draw a picture of their person. After I've clicked off, you'll notice below the text area we've got this text box, and there's some pieces of information that I think are important to highlight. I'll go ahead and bring the target out, and they're right down here. And what this tells us is when we press enter, that's going to save the text area and take us out. It's going to save whatever you've typed and allow you to go back to the draw program to go ahead and do your next action. So if you're going to create a text area where you're going to be needing multiple lines, you're going to want to actually push shift and enter at the same time to then separate the line to act as when you push return. So when you press return or enter, that's going to finish the text box and move on. To move to the next line, you're going to go ahead and press shift and return. And I need to go ahead and write my instructions. Please draw a picture of your person. I don't need any more lines, so I'm going to go ahead and push enter. And now my text area shows within the shape that I put there. And now we're starting to layer objects on top of one another. This text box, which I can move around, is now on top of the first shape that I brought in there. So I like to explain it to my kids that when we first start, we're working with that checkered background, and that's the very first layer. That is the bottom layer. Second layer now will be the object or the shape that we brought in, and the third layer I've got is my little caption, which is a text area. As I had said earlier, the guidelines will start to appear and work off of the different objects. Right now it's telling me that my text area is centered within the middle of this shape. And if I find myself wanting to do anything with the text box itself, some more tools are now coming to life now that I'm working with the text area. So I can change the font and the size and anything else. I end up finding myself changing the alignment more than I do anything else. I don't necessarily like everything centered, and when we bring a text box into a draw program or into a draw file, it always is centered, and then I just don't want everything centered. So that's what I can go ahead and take care of right here. All right, well now we've got our area that we're going to have the students draw the information, and we've got our instructions or just reminders of what that box is for. I'm going to go ahead and bring in a couple other boxes as well, and it doesn't matter what shape you use. It depends on what it is you're asking your kids to perform or would like them to perform. And we'll bring one in there. I'm going to click so I can highlight it. I've got my handles telling me that that's the object I'm working with. Let's go with a white background again, and that's just going to save ink. You don't want to wait. You want to save anywhere you can. Bring another shape below that. Like I had said, there's also arrows and other objects you can bring in. I'm going to go over to the line object, which is right next to my shapes, and I can bring in an arrow like this, which will allow me to draw an arrow with a line there. I don't necessarily need one for this particular project, but if you were to have some sort of a sequencing where you start from step 1 and you go to step 2, it would be nice to have those available. The shapes do have some really nice arrows as well. I find these ones to be really helpful when it comes to showing an order or where to start. I'm going to start here and I'm going to end up there. So these are nice tools to have as well, nice options to have as well. I'll make this one a little bit larger, and I can also start to put in some other information. This particular area that I'm going to put some information, I'm now going to use the Shift Enter because I'd like to separate the lines. So this will be for the quick biography. Shift Enter allows me to return, and if I want to separate it, if I want double spacing, I'm going to have to go ahead and just press return twice here. I could go back into the tools, the toolbar, and do that as well. Let's say born, have a city born in. And there's a quick mistake that I kind of find myself doing. I just pressed return and not shift return. So I'm going to need to go back and double click into the text area. Now I can shift return. Importance to the expedition. Great. Now I am done, so I'm going to press return. And this is why I like to be able to go and justify everything to the left. I'm just not a fan of it being centered all the time. Now I've got some more text areas to help my kids understand what it is I'm looking for, and it'll also guide them with their research as well. So this box, they'll be filling in some information about who it is that they studied, where they were born, and what was their importance to the expedition. So my little template here is coming along quite well. There's also some really nice little objects that we can put in to kind of tie this all together, to just really bring it together from being rather than just a piece of paper into into something that could be displayed at some point. From rather than just being a piece of paper that they take notes on, it's a final piece, or it's a final production that gives a little more accountability in terms of the quality of their work. To add just to add that air of professionalism, I'm going to go back to my shapes, and the first one down, I've got my shapes again. And now I'm going to find within the middle area the half frame. And I like these little things. These things are great. What it does is it just kind of really makes it look like something you'd find in a classroom, or something you'd find maybe in a museum. It just gives corners, and I just think that these are absolutely the best little tie-ins. It just makes it look that much better. When I create one of these corners, I'm rather rather than trying to reproduce it over and over and over, I'm just going to edit and copy it. I'm going to edit, pull menu, go down to copy, and then edit and paste. And I'm going to go ahead and move these around. Use the different tools so I can line them up in the other corners. I find it takes a little bit of a steady hand, or maybe not a trackpad, to really get these in the nice way. Excuse me. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that these are working off of each other. The grid lines will start to let you know when they are lined up with one another. There we go. And I'll just copy and paste again. Bring the next one down. Turn it around, kind of eyeball it, then bring it to the corner and finish it off. Copy and paste one more time. Bring it to the next corner. And even though these aren't really lined up well, I am working a little bit fast here. You get the idea that you can take it from being rather just a piece of paper to something that looks rather nice. I'm going to go ahead and use my line tool now, and the line tool is going to go ahead and really, in my opinion, bring these all together. I'm going to press delete if I don't like where I was going with that. Bring my line tool again. We'll get those lines matched up here. They will try to find points on the objects to kind of help line themselves up, so it may take a little bit of work. I'm also using the little arrows on my keyboard to sort of move things around and get it to be exactly where I want it. If the grid lines ever become a problem and you're just not happy with those, you'll want to go to the View Pull menu and go down to the Snap to, and you can turn the guides off. And now it's going to snap to grid. That's just one way, one suggestion to help help make it a little bit easier to create the exact line that you're looking for. So that's just one example of how you would use Google Drawing in terms of for your kids. Once you get this taken care of, once you get whatever template you're looking to create, once it's created, you can save it for as long as you're using that particular topic, or that you'll be addressing that particular topic, and any changes you want to do can always be done later on. A couple of the items that became available while we were working with the lines are the line thickness. And you'll notice how my line at the bottom starts to change when I change its weight. So a little bit thicker of a line might be good for sort of the framed look. There's also line dashes, the ability to create line dashes and dots. And you can also change arrowheads. Add an arrowhead, change an arrowhead direction, which is great for a flowchart. So that is one option you can do with Google Drive.